Hi, I'm Aaron Dean, and this is Advocate Today. The Women's World Cup is underway, and a lot of people are highlighting gains made in equity, both in media attention and in pay. The first match between Norway and New Zealand shattered attendance records with 42,000 people in the stands. It was the largest crowd to see a women's soccer game in New Zealand. And big brands are responding with 30 major sponsors taking every partnership program. That's a 100% increase since the last World Cup in 2019. Still, the gender pay gap looms large over the World Cup. Women's players this year will, on average, earn just 25 cents for every dollar earned by men in their World Cup last year. FIFA initially announced that 49 of the $110 million in prize money will go directly to the players, with $30,000 for each player and $270,000 to each player on the winning team. FIFA says that money is given to the nation's soccer federation to disperse. This compares to the $440 million given at the Men's World Cup. It's estimated that 1 billion viewers will tune in for the Women's World Cup this year. Players are concerned about the number of ACL injuries this year. In fact, women are 6 times more likely to suffer from an ACL injury compared to men. One Dutch striker says that if men notice an uptick in ACL injuries, something would be done about it.
I mean, imagine having 4 ACLs at Man City this season, there would be a massive thing about it. But I do also think because the women's game has grown, obviously it is more visible, people are putting more attention to it. But I hope it's not just attention, I hope it's in the end like a financial injection as well, and that all of us will benefit from it. I think we need to spend into research. But for me, what clubs should be doing right now and what national teams should be doing is spend directly into your medical teams. Because in the end, research will give us a solution in maybe 5-6 years' time, where at least a financial change or like a change in your medical team might give us a solution right now.
Experts are working on ways to level the playing field for women in sports. I spoke with Goorevich, who is researching solutions at the Tucker Institute of Research on girls and women in sports at the University of Minnesota. With the Women's World Cup upon us, do you see any improvements when it comes to equity compared to, the last World Cup and years before that?
Yes, totally. I mean, this World Cup is for sure going to be one of the most exciting women's sports spectacles in history. And traditionally, we've seen sport media is an extremely masculine-dominated sector. And women, especially in the media, this have been extremely underrepresented, with the stats kind of hovering for things like ESPN Sports Center. Women only gain about 4 to 6% of visibility on ESPN Sports Center. So historically, we've seen a lot of barriers for women to kind of be visible in sports media. And even when women have been visible, the ways in which women have been presented in sports have been extremely discriminatory. So women athletes have often been trivialized, they've been over-sexualized, and they've been infantilized for their sporting abilities rather than being represented as the powerful, driven, strong athletes that they are. And currently, we're seeing a lot of changes kind of in that field. We're seeing a lot more media companies invest in women's sports and make it more accessible and visible for audiences. We've seen, especially some of our work at the Tucker Center has helped challenge these stereotypical or over-sexualized ways in which women athletes have been represented. And hopefully we're seeing kind of in this World Cup and even kind of in the lead up to it with different fun advertisements, especially ones put out by Nike. We've been seeing women athletes being presented for their achievements and for their performances as athletes.
With all of these new efforts in place and more strides being taken, how is this going to, I guess the phrase is, impact the sports industry as a whole?
Great question. And we're kind of in a moment right now in sports history where women's sports and investment in women's sports business is booming in ways that we've never seen before. So women's sports really for the past few decades and kind of since the growth of women's professional sports, they've never been invested in, where historically we've seen in men's sports, they've been given a lot of tax breaks, a lot of investment, even when men's sports might not even be making profit. So women have proven that we've seen that we're making profit. We're seeing huge stadium sellouts across the world, especially in women's soccer. Even for this World Cup, they had to expand certain stadiums because there was so much demand for tickets. And so even with such little visibility that women's sports have, fans are attending and they're coming out in full force and they're proving that people are interested in women's sports. And so, and that's companies and brands, they're paying attention. And so we're seeing so much greater brand investment that we've never seen before in women's sports. And it's almost, if you're a company or if you're a brand, if you're not on the women's sports bandwagon, it's almost getting too late really to make the most of that investment.
Yeah, and like you said, media outlets are, doing a little bit more, but how can they continue to stay on the right track? Because of course, sometimes it could be like a quick little fad and they're like, okay, well, it's over now. We're going to go back to what we were doing. But how can they continue to stay on this positive track?
Right. I think media can think a lot about the ways in which we're showing women's sports. So something, I'll use the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, as an example for this. The different camera angles and the different lighting and the replay systems and all these things that are a part of sport media and sport games that make it exciting. We haven't really been using those tools in women's sports the way we do in men's sports. And preferences for sport aren't created in a vacuum. It's media companies and it's places like ESPN and Sports Center that are driving interest and that are helping to cultivate interest in women's sports. And so what media companies can do on the back end is ensuring that they're putting women's sports kind of in the best primetime spots. They can ensure that they're having the best quality of their programming. So the NWSL in recent years has made huge strides in their quality of programming, making sure that the picture is clear. That's something that hasn't always been a given in women's sports. The camera angles are kind of in those exciting action shots, and women are presented in kind of these athletic stances and not a million miles away where you can't see them. So these are the little steps, these different types of tools and strategies used to make men's sports exciting that have been taken for granted for decades. These are things that we now need to see as a standard in women's sports.
And, kind of switching gears just a little bit, the U.S. women's national team made history last year by, obtaining equal pay compared to the men's teams. And as we know, Megan Rapinoe has announced that this would be her last tournament. Can you kind of talk about her impact on not just the game itself, but also can you speak to her impact to the sports industry with all the work that she's done to fight for equity?
Wow, I mean, I could probably write a dissertation on Megan Rapinoe's impact on the sports world and probably not even have enough words to say. I mean, I think especially, obviously, her impact just of her performance, probably in the 2019 World Cup, she was the best player, won the Golden Ball, won the Golden Boot, and really was the leader both on and off the field for the U.S. But in kind of shaping women's sports and how we conceptualize women's sports, she has irreversibly changed it. She's especially just her presence as being an openly queer athlete who's unapologetically herself with colorful hair and all, and so confident in her abilities, and standing up to Donald Trump as she did in the last World Cup and being kind of so open about her advocacy and her social justice views. That's something that has been kind of integrated as a standard of women's sport, really, is that women's sports is a political venue sometimes. And women athletes, they are taught for so long and accustomed for so long to accept kind of bare minimum standards. And she was one of these people that have said, we don't have to settle for less. We can actually advocate and use our voices for change and for equality. And I think she's really blazed a path for so many athletes coming after her, for the next generation of athletes, to make sure that we don't have to settle for inferior standards, and that sport can also be a freeing and welcoming place for all, no matter your gender identity, your sexuality, and just any or racial identity and anything like that.
And you can visit the Tucker Center online or coachingher.com for more information on Anna's work in sports equity. And thank you so much for watching Advocate Today. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store to stream us live, and you can even subscribe on our YouTube channel. For the Advocate channel, I'm Aaron Dean, and this was Advocate Today.